Hello, world cultures and geography class. Hopefully, everyone is doing well. It's your girl, Miss Whiteside. Hopefully, everybody's up in their spirits. Yesterday was a beautiful day, and I did want to kind of give you guys an idea of your journal entries. It's kind of showing you guys something that I would do for my journal entry. I'll do that sometime today for you. So, just so you guys know, I know a lot of you guys have had a lot of questions regarding what are we doing, what's going on, all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to kind of go over with you some of my expectations so that way you're not confused. For one, everyone in every single class period should be going through Google Classroom, reading the information I'm giving you, like, for example, life in a shantytown. I'll go over the answers with that today. And then also making sure you're at least taking a look at all the questions, responding to these. You can continue to do these things in your notebook. If you don't have your notebook with you, use other sheets of paper, but don't lose anything because once we go back to school or once we start basically our official e-learning, you will need to have those things. Okay. Right now, I am keeping um, points, okay, that can only hurt you, doesn't take away from your grade at all. It can only help you. So if you're responding to a question I put out there, if you're showing me your work every time that happens, I'm actually jotting down points next to your name, which eventually you'll be seeing in the Skyward probably later this week or beginning of next week. You'll start to see those points going there, which will help to improve your grade going up. So again, please remember, this is your education. It doesn't have to be based on any type of grade. It's so that you can go out and be career and college ready when that time comes. So just because it's not mandated doesn't mean you sit around and do nothing. Keep this learning. That's very important. All right, so I'm gonna quickly go through a few things here. Life in the shanty town. You guys should have read that. And shanty towns are uh, as you can see, very poor areas. And you'll find this not just in Latin American countries, you'll find this sometimes even in some places in the United States, like California. You go downtown LA, you'll see thousands of people in places like this underneath the highways. So this isn't just something in Latin America. This is from continent to continent. You can find places where people live like this, and it's very sad. Again, as you read through the information, it talks about their lives, what they kind of do. Many of them are working. Again, keep in mind the work will probably be not, it is pretty much set every day for them to work, but it might be seasonal work. So if they're picking grapes or if they're picking fruit and things like that, that's seasonal work, which means you're not always going to have a job. So I wanted to kind of go over a few things on the list here. So you guys have the questions at the bottom, and so I will also go over the responses to that. So on page 79 there, you have your questions. I'm trying to see if I can write on here. I know on the other one I could, so I may have to probably try to figure that part out. But I'm definitely going to go over what you guys should have. And after reading all this information, give me a second to get out all my little good stuff here. All right, so the first question, which would not be a logical assumption about Mexican shanty towns? So as we look at this here, uh, again, if you was to break this down, most people who live in shanty towns are not making a livable wage. Remember, we're going back to this not. Okay, so if I could highlight there, that's what I would highlight. So we know most of them are not making a livable wage. So this is not going to work as an answer. Conditions in the shanty towns are dangerous and can cause disease. Hmm, something to think about. C, most people who live in shanty towns are unable to find steady work. So it does talk about them finding work, but it's just not necessarily um, As we can see, let me see if I can find that list up here. Okay, just bear with me. I'm trying to find that statement there. So it says, which would not be a logical assumption about Mexican shantytowns? C is the answer. Most people who live in shantytowns are unable to find steady work. So this one is not the answer because it does mention that they do work. Okay. A typical day starts before sunrise when most men and women get up around 6 a.m. Most men, as well as some women, go to work. So right there is where you will find that answer. So C is the one that fits that. All right, so next question. A synonym for the word Q used in the last paragraph is, so the answer should have been again C, which is line. And what do you think would be the worst thing about living in a shanty town and why? Again, everybody's answer might be different on this one. You might say just the fact that it's a dwelling with cardboard and sheets of metal, okay, not secure, um, not necessarily going to keep you warm or cool you off depending on the temperature outside. So things like that are things that I would write there. So moving on to the next one here. Now, if you take a look at this chart, what's the situation? So this kind of gives you a lot of information from country to country. And if you look at this as which country would I not want to live in and which one I would, this is a good indicator. Okay. So it depends on what you're looking for too. So if you look at places like Argentina, their per capita, the best way I like to look at this is always comparing it to the US and Canada. Okay. Because we tend to be modern countries, we tend to have a lot more wealth. So if you look at what we have here, which is a 59, Canada 48, and you can see there's not too many countries doing it much better. Bermuda, you do, okay, and that could be because of tourism, okay. Percent of unemployed, you can see compared to U.S. we are 4.4. For some reason here you have, go back down here. I just saw it. So 3.7 here for Mexico, which is really low. So I don't know if they're counting the seasonal work, the fact that people do have jobs, but maybe those jobs just don't pay them enough. Okay. So you don't have to be unemployed to still be poor. So here, moving on to the next one, this is percent of living in extreme poverty. And you can see there are some places where it is very high. So, like for example, Guatemala, 59.3. So you can see why a lot of them are crossing the borders with their families, trying to go to other countries. They want a better life for their family. You have here, Peru is pretty high. And again, a lot of it may come down to the standard of living too. If many of them are living in remote areas, as if they were still like in living as natives 100 or 200 years ago, the standards might be somewhat different. Doesn't mean they're not happy. So those are other things to think about. And then infant mortality rate. This does says a lot. That means do they have medicine, hospitals, and things like that built up in their countries. So if you take a look at the U.S., we're 5.7. All of these are pretty high. Literacy rate. Most of them seem to do pretty well as far as literacy. I think in modern times, most countries do, but you can see there's a few. Nicaragua, 67. And this is a pretty, still kind of war torn country at this time. Paraguay is very low. I'm not sure what's going on with that country because across the board, you can see they have some pretty high numbers. And then the last one there for average of life expectancy. Okay. None of them seem to compare to the US or Canada. Doesn't mean they don't have people who live to 90 or 100 years old. It's just the average numbers are much lower than compared to Canada and the US. So as you take a look at that chart there, you read how the other half lives. So this kind of gives you an idea of someone who lives in some of these Latin American countries. Like this one right here, for example, is in Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and they're living a pretty nice life. Okay, it talks about how their apartment is decorated, being able to buy art, all that good stuff. So they are living a pretty nice life. And then you have, of course, this income distribution in Latin America. Again, the lowest 20% to the highest 20%. So there's a big discrepancy between the very rich and the very poor. So a lot of times when you have countries where there's a big gap, and I think I've mentioned this many times in class, if there's not a huge middle class, your country will have a very hard time. All right, so drawing conclusions. I want to kind of give you guys some examples that I have here, just so everybody's on the same page. So we have here drawing conclusions. Which Latin American country appears to have the worst conditions and why? So again, this isn't just one answer. There's a couple of things that you can put here. It depends on how you look at it. So for example, the first one I have down Haiti. If you take a look at their per capita or GDP, which is one of the terms you guys wrote down. And also they have a high infant mortality. And then we have Guatemala, which has a high rate of poverty, or Venezuela due to its high unemployment. So again, just don't write down an answer. Please write down why. It's always important. You guys know that's important. The why is always the important thing. When we're looking at and studying any country, whatever the topic may be, whether it be environment, whatever, we want to understand the why, because as you guys become adults, this is the part where you're going to one day possibly be in politics making decisions for people that live in these countries, or what businesses should go there, how they should manage these businesses, things like that. So things to think about. This is very important. Let me do one more and then I'll stop here. Which Latin American country appears to be doing the best and why? So some of the things I jotted down. Again, remember your answers will vary. Bermuda stands out with this very high per capita GDP and low unemployment. And again, I kind of mentioned could be because of tourism. Many people are going there to relax, put their money in there, have a good time. So not many people who are out of work. Also, it also depends on what else that you're looking. Like I said, as long as you're telling why, you're totally fine. And as you can see, you go on the list here. So I want to go back to this not available. This question right here. Why do you think some information is noted as not available? So again, there's not one set answer. Just kind of use your noodles up there. And some of the things you could put is Latin American governments may hide the seriousness of their problems, or that it is difficult to gather information from people when they are living in shantytowns. People can possibly be migrating from place to place, constantly moving because of their living conditions, which means you're probably not getting all the information correct. So just like here in the US, we have the census that we're doing by April 1st. A lot of your parents will be doing that either online. And if you don't do it online, they'll be knocking on your door. They want to see how many people live in your household, who has jobs. And then from there, we take those numbers and we put together things that you see here. We kind of get a general idea of who's unemployed, who's working, is there enough money for them to live off of, things like that, just from those statements that they're going to ask you for the 2020 census. And remember, again, the census is done every 10 years. So next one will be 2030. All right. So from here, as you guys finish this assignment, if you haven't done it, hopefully you get to it today. I'm going to briefly mention tomorrow about rulers then and now. So this isn't something you have to worry about at this point in time. I will go over that later today and kind of give you more directions. And as we begin to finish up the Latin American information, my plan is to, at some point, get you guys to be able to do research on one of the countries if we do go back to the classroom. That will be our, but if we don't, then part of our e-learning will be putting together this project. So that's why it's really important that you're doing all the work in between. So that way, when you pick a country, you kind of understand